little when you're with me. Don't be small when I'm around. Think big and look at what you see, and keep your feet on the ground. We go to parties with each other. You live in the shadow of a man. You can't imagine being without me, 'cause that's when your life began. But baby, don't act little when you're with me. Don't be small when I'm around. Think big and look at what you see, and keep your feet on the ground.
I want to take you back in time. Way, way back in time. Hello, I'm Diane Cilento. I know what you're thinking. She's gone right off. Actually, she's gone off much more than I have, because she died in 2011, aged 78, after a very happy and successful life.
The only thing we've got in common is that we're both actresses. I'm an actress pretending to be an actress, pretending to be Diane Cilento. In fact, not even that. I'm not even a real actress.
Anyway, I want to take you way, way back in time, back to 1956, when, in the island of Bermuda, she was filming the wonderful smash hit film The Admirable Crichton with the deeply wonderful Kenneth More and the equally wonderful Cecil Parker.
Are you ambitious?
My lady, I am the son of a butler and a lady's maid, the happiest of all combinations.
The Admirable Crichton was a story written by J.M. Barrie, who wrote Peter Pan. Originally a successful stage play, it was about a shipwreck. The people stranded on a desert island were the upstairs and downstairs inhabitants of a posh London mansion, and very soon the leader, or governor, became the butler Crichton, played by Kenneth More, and Tweenie, his between-stairs maid, Diane Cilento. In America, it was renamed Paradise Lagoon, and it became the second most popular movie in the world in 1957, after the wonderful High Society, starring Frank Sinatra, Bing Crosby, and perhaps the only actress nearly as gorgeous as Diane Cilento, Grace Kelly. Anyway, we all went to Bermuda and found this fabulous deserted cove. The only person who ever came there was a handsome boy who lived nearby. He was called Dennis Corday. 17-year-old Diane immediately hit it off with the only other person of a similar age. Director Lewis Gilbert had taken Dennis on as an odd job boy and general dog's body, and he was a huge hit with the cast and the crew, being willing and strong and energetic and helpful. After Diane informed Dennis that she'd just married, and Dennis let Diane know that a relationship was out of the question anyway, as he was gay, they became close friends. As indeed Dennis did with Kenny Moore and Lewis Gilbert and the entire party. They worked happily for months. In later life, when watching the movie, Butler Crichton brings cocktails to the rescuers, served in coconut shells. Dennis used to say with pride, "I made those coconut glasses."
By coincidence, when I moved here in 1967, my next-door neighbours were Kenneth More and his wife, Angela Douglas, two really lovely people who put up with the horrendous noise of my early pop hits, such as Hedgehogs Anonymous, Genesis, and so on.
It's Good News Week. Someone's dropped a bomb somewhere, contaminating atmosphere and blackening the sky. It's Good News Week. Someone's found a way to give the rotting dead a will to live, go on and never die.
They were really sweet, but Angela said they decided they had to move when she found herself in the kitchen banging on the wall with a knife and realising the blade of the knife was going past her head by inches. That was the point when she turned to Kenny and said, "You know, I think we've got to move." As filming completed and they got ready to move back to London to do the final editing, both Kenneth More and Lewis Gilbert decided that Dennis Corday was an essential part of the production and insisted that he came to London with them. Dennis was delighted, seeing his career and future life well planned, and packed up and moved. They found him a small flat in Walton-on-Thames in Surrey, very close to the film studios.
Dennis was a lovely boy, but openly gay, and I had just married Andrea, who I later divorced, and I went on to marry Sean Connery, who later became James Bond.
Life in England was spectacular to the little village lad used to fishing alone near his village in sunny Bermuda. Buses and taxis everywhere, more people than he'd ever seen, shopping malls, and most exciting of all, the film studios. But tragedy struck. "Oh no," said the powerful unions. "He's not British. He cannot work on a British film in Great Britain, this mighty centre of the empire. Only local lads can set foot in the edit suites of Shepperton Studios." Kenneth More and Lewis Gilbert and Diane Cilento were absolutely devastated, but in the 50s, trade unions ruled and there was nothing they could do about it. They gave him some money to pay his rent and buy food, but he had to get a job and managed to find a junior position in a record shop in Walton-on-Thames. In those days, couples would go to music shops to listen to the new music and the new hits because radio and TV exposure was very limited. There were brand new groups called teenagers and a brand new music called rock and roll. Before even mods and rockers, boys and girls would cram into tiny booths and listen to the latest hits. Dennis noticed them trying to dance together in spaces slightly smaller than sardine cans. And he noticed a hall down the road, owned by the church, originally a film studios itself, in the days of silent movies. Dennis had an idea. Why not hire a nearby church hall and play the music very, very loudly so the teenagers could dance together in comfort? It was incredibly successful. The little tiny church hall was absolutely packed night after night, making thousands for Dennis. Today there's even a Facebook page. Many French students came over to stay with families in Walton and the surrounding Surrey areas, loved the hop, thought it was a terrific idea, went back home to France and persuaded friends to open similar places, naming them discotheques. So clubs changed radically. Dennis Corday had started and invented disco. I first met Dennis Corday in the late 1960s. His little club had become a huge success. Major superstars were doing personal appearances there. Stars like the mighty Billy Fury, who were huge at the time. The Walton Hop was the perfect venue to test out tracks. If the kids didn't like a song, they left the dance floor. It was where I checked out the Bay City Rollers, who mimed to their first hit, one of my productions on which I sang 13 of the 14 vocals, Keep On Dancing. The kids at the Walton Hop loved it, we released it, and it soared into the top 10, selling hundreds of thousands of copies. Dennis and I became very good friends.
And any distraction during that particular tune, ladies and gentlemen, was my fault because I attacked the drummer with a long pole when he was out of camera shot of his. How about that then? Now then, ladies and gentlemen, it's all happening tonight, I'll tell you. Here is the one and only, let it all hang out, Mr. Jonathan King.
I preach, my dear friends, you're about to receive old John Barleycorn, nicotine, and the temptations of Eve.
A few years earlier, I had a hit with Let It All Hang Out. It sold 500,000 around the world and earned me £1 million. A lot of money in those days.
No parking, bout a suicide, hot dog, my razor broke, water dripping up a spout, but I don't care, let it all hang out.
The profits came because I was not only the singer, but the producer. I wrote and published the B-side, had it featured on thousands of compilation albums of hits, and bought the publishing too.
Hanging from a pine tree, by my knees, sunshine through the shade, nobody knows what it's all about, too much man, let it all hang out.
One of the many DJs I met at this time was Surrey and Pirate Radio DJ Rob Randall. Rob and Dennis were also friends, and Rob became the resident DJ at the Walton Hop for a while.
So man, walking upside down, my TV's on a blink, make Galileo look like a Boy Scout. Sorry about that, let it all hang out.
Rob Randall was to be involved on the Fringe when Surrey Police, ably assisted by Max Clifford and the soon-to-leave police under mysterious circumstances Mark Williams Thomas, tried and succeeded in stitching me up many years later when Operation Arundel began in the year 2000.
Sleep all day, drive all night, brain my numb, can't stop now, sure ain't no doubt, keep an open mind, let it all hang out.
Indeed, Williams Thomas was one of the officers who raided Rob's flat and arrested him in 2000. Operation Arundel was a debacle too, but at the time a successful one. I was wrongly convicted and given a 7-year sentence, which I am still appealing.
Raining inside a big brown moon, and that messy baby up late eating a Reuben sandwich with sauerkraut. Don't stop now, baby, let it all.
Much of the fresh evidence of my innocence only emerged during the debacle, Judge Taylor's word, of Operation Ravine in 2018. And the name Mark Williams Thomas cropped up a lot during that farce. Sadly, so did Rob Randall. Rob Randall was one of the men arrested on the 9th of September 2015. So was Dennis Corday, and so was I. And then, of course, there is Jeffrey Epstein.
In other news, Jeffrey Epstein was a wealthy man. If he had been a poor plumber or a street sweeper, there would possibly have been no complaints about his behaviour. Like Jimmy Savile and Michael Jackson, he is now dead. Is he a victim of changing morality coupled with media promotion? Or was he a vile pervert? We'll never know for sure. Like Bill Cosby and Harvey Weinstein and Kevin Spacey and R. Kelly, he could be the victim of a witch hunt. Or he could be a monster hiding in plain sight. Who knows? Stay tuned for rapidly changing news.
I'm rather sad to say I never was abused myself as a child. I feel a bit left out. I'd want to be me too, please, as everybody else is claiming compensation. But then I started thinking, and I remembered how at my prep school, Stoke House, which I hated, I was constantly beaten by the headmaster, horrendous Arthur Spring Rice Piper, dreadful man with dyed black hair and black glasses. And I remember when he used to actually beat me, he had one hand stuffed deep into his pocket and was sort of grunting in an ecstatic fashion. Well, of course, all these years later, where my innocence has long been lost in the travails of history, it dawns on me that he was actually getting sexual gratification out of it, and I was indeed his sex toy. This is the new restaurant in my little hotel, and I think it has very good food and looks highly original, and I've made a new friend. Hello. Back in the year 2000, my plight was described by top journalists as being similar to Oscar Wilde. So way back then, I wrote and sang a song called Wild about boys.
You've got to have consent, clear understanding what is meant. But if they don't regard it bent, they may well discover it was heaven sent. There's nothing wrong with buggering boys as long as he's doing what he enjoys. Don't startle the horses or make too much noise. But there's nothing wrong with buggering boys. There's nothing wrong with buggering boys. Make sure your partner's not too young or old, or simply doing what he's told. But if he feels more hot than cold, in the passion of the moment you'll be solid gold. There's nothing wrong with buggering boys as long as he's doing what he enjoys. Don't startle the horses or make too much noise. But there's nothing wrong with buggering boys. There's nothing wrong with buggering boys. The Greeks and Spartans thought it styled, and Michelangelo was beguiled. Don't let its glory be defiled. If you share the loving, it can drive you wild. There's nothing wrong with buggering boys as long as he's doing what he enjoys. Don't startle the horses or make too much noise. But there's nothing wrong with buggering boys. There's nothing wrong with buggering boys.
I love my grand tours of Europe where I take little car and zip around France, Italy, Germany, Switzerland. 20 years ago, musicians realised they could write and record a #1 million-selling smash for no money in their bedrooms. These days, thanks to the incredible camera on the iPhone, Final Cut Pro for editing, and Christmas presents like tiny drones, you can make award-winning films like this for no budget with the help of a few friends. I had a talk with my friend Stephen Fry after his brilliant one-man stage tour for Mythos, where he said the art of storytelling needed to be revived. I agree with him. The old cinema adage, show, don't tell, needs updating. These days, both show and tell can make a good movie if combined with a good plot, script, and variety of visual ingredients. The world is a wonderful, glorious place, but it can also contain some dreadful, awful elements.
Bubble, bubble, boil and trouble, fire burn and cauldron bubble.
My name is Detective Chief Inspector Fitzgerald, but everyone calls me Fitzy, except for my enemies, who call me Ditzy Fitzy.
My name is Hendrix, and everyone calls me Purples because of some obscure hit by a 60s guitarist.
I'm Ivy Fulf. Call me Fulf.
I've called you all together to discuss how we're going to get publicity after arresting 3 innocent men and smearing their names and reputations all over the media. This investigation, which we'll call Raving, is meant to be examining possible sex abuse in the first discotheque in Britain years ago.
Well, we need to arrest and question the owner of the Walton Hop. The problem is we know he's innocent and has never abused anyone, but he is openly gay, and back in the 60s being gay was illegal. Problem is, absurdly now, it isn't. So we need to pretend two men he's known since they were young have complained about being abused by him when they were below the age of consent. That was never in the 60s, but then ridiculously became 21. Perverts were allowed to have sex with each other if both were over 21. Sick, mad, bonkers.
But the ages of consent have now been equalised at 16. Balmy! As if men knew how to love when they reached the age of 16. Most men aren't capable of loving at any age. Vile creatures. I'm getting divorced.
The other problem is these two men will deny any abuse took place, as it didn't. So we better arrest the perpetrators before we question the, inverted commas, victims.
Brilliant. We'll keep the old pervert in custody and question him in Woking police station. Not a nice venue. And we'll get all the publicity in the media, and I'll ask other victims to come forward, which they always do when it's all over the media. Isn't the media a wonderful thing? When you're trying to fit innocent people up for raises, budget increases and promotions.
So the mighty Surrey police force leapt into action in order to provoke the most enormous media attention, and hopefully some more believable false accusers could be attracted by the appeal of compensation, notoriety, fame, sympathy and hard cash, and would make more false allegations against more innocent people. Many officers joined the police force because of the thrill of smashing down doors and causing extreme distress to elderly residents. The cop in charge of my state-sanctioned rape, which is what I considered it, as they raped my home, raped my reputation and raped my ability to speak normally, told me in the car going down to the police station that the reason he joined the police force is because it was so much more exciting than his previous job. What, I asked him, had been his previous job? Ah, he was an accountant.
I am a bit nervous. I had to lie on oath to one magistrate to get search warrants. Then another magistrate refused a second search warrant, and we had to forge one using an old discarded form to get into an NatWest banking vault. Sadly, it contained nothing of any interest.
I helped you with that one, Officer Forth.
Yes, you did. Thank you, Officer Purples. But I don't want to get done for forgery, or even perjury, as I'm sure you don't either.
Stop arguing, girls. We're here to get results. Now, how did the other raids go?
OK. Corday's victims, as expected, refused to admit any abuse.
Hardly surprising, since it never happened.
Well, one of them, the quadriplegic in a wheelchair, was very sad about the whole thing.
Never mind. We've got a great story. I'll give it to the press. Say it's all about an investigation at Walton Hop. And voila! Numerous other accusers, victims, will come out of the woodwork seeking compensation, closure, encouraged by the media headlines. I do love being on telly.
Okay, very funny. But I don't want you thinking this is a funny film. It's actually deadly serious. Apart from anything else, it involves the deaths of 3 innocent human beings. Talking heads. All this movie is talking heads. And the worst thing is, they're all the same bloody talking head, thinly disguised. I could form a pop group. I think it's absolutely disgusting. I am DCI Little Dick, and I'm here at the Police Federation seminar to answer any of your questions regarding exactly how to bend the rules. Can I avoid cross-examination and judicial questions at a trial by pretending to be ill? Oh yes, that's actually a very good way to get out of being cross-examined or the judge asking you stupid questions. But the best thing of all is actually to pretend to have a very serious illness, such as cancer or a heart attack or possibly a stroke of some kind. But you must make absolutely sure that you have a doctor, a friendly, legitimate doctor, who is genuine and valid and perhaps prepared to take a bit of money, and they are actually prepared to sign a document saying your illness is absolutely 100% genuine. The other thing is, don't make the terrible mistake of being able to get something like cancer or heart attack or stroke or some kind of illness, and therefore not being able to appear at any trial that might be in a few months' time or a year's time or something. So you say to the judge, absolutely impossible to appear at the trial, and then suddenly when the trial is cancelled or doesn't take place or something, miraculously you have a recovery, and 3 weeks later you return to work, possibly even with a promotion. Don't make that mistake, because it could kill the trial off. And then, of course, there is Peter Saunders.
In other news, Peter Saunders claimed to be a victim of abuse, though his story changed radically over the years. On the strength of being a survivor, he built up a healthy charity, making loads of cash, and became a media spokesperson, saying false allegations were vanishingly rare. He was thrown out of a Vatican commission, tossed out of the independent child sex abuse inquiry, and removed from his own charity. Hypocrisy reigns.
I think hopefully that's all right. Yes, that should be recording, I think.
No, that's not all right, Jonathan, because I'm too much this way.
No.
I should be back this way.
Well, look at me, and I'm looking at you.
Yeah, and I'm still too much on this side.
That way.
So I should be about
That's
here.
it, that's better.
Okay?
Yeah, so look at me.
Yeah.
And I'll...
Dennis never lost his love for film, and even when I was trying to interview him, insisted on changing the camera position and giving me directorial instructions. But he was a lovely man, despite being cantankerous, as his friend Graham Catlin admits.
Dennis was a wonderful person, very kind, very generous, articulate in all his doings. He was cantankerous, awkward, but a very, very lovable guy. I knew him well for over 55 years.
Another of his lifelong friends was Ronnie Remnant.
Oh, well, he was a very, how can I put it, very generous of his nature. He's just a very, very, very kind person. You couldn't say there's anything bad about him. He was a terrific personality. He was from Bermudian. He was from Bermuda. In fact, I met his mother. She came over to England for a while and stayed with him, and she had a weird, really strong Bermudian accent. I always remember she said, instead of saying the oven, the oven.
Dennis made many dear friends through the Walton Hop, including Lawrence and Liam, Ronnie's grandson.
This is about as close as you can get to paradise. The Villa Cora in Florence, Italy, where Napoleon used to stay and where I stay, with the most beautiful views of Florence, the most fabulous scenery, the most wonderful trees, the marvellous pool, the beautiful decorations. It is absolutely heavenly. Lawrence! I want you to tell them about Lawrence! Ah, yes, Lawrence. Well, this story is quite appalling. The problem Surrey police had was that there were absolutely no complaints of any kind against Dennis Corday. Even digging through past files and elderly documents provoked nothing. Nobody to encourage, no one to assist with false claims. Essentially, it had been a dead end, as indeed it would prove to be for Dennis and his friends. Now this part must remain conjecture. Faced by utter silence, the three witches concocted an imaginary anonymous call. They may have actually had one, but I doubt it. This caller made false allegations about Dennis, a decent, caring, loving man who would never and had never abused anyone or had sex with anyone against their will or had ever tried to do so with anyone under the age of 16. They accused him of sexually abusing two of his closest friends years ago. One was Liam, almost his grandson, who he had brought up because his father was dead and his mother had to work as a single mum all hours to bring in food and keep a roof over their heads.
No, yeah, it's like another grandfather in a way, yeah, absolutely.
The other was Lawrence. I read here the answer Dennis gave when being questioned about Lawrence. I knew Lawrence from a while ago. He's about 50 now. We're still very good friends. We exchange Christmas presents. Even up to now, both of these people visit me and we exchange Christmas gifts. Someone has a grudge against me. This has never happened. I've never been convicted of any of this. Lawrence was quadriplegic. He should never have survived the terrible motorcycle accident he had when he was around 20. But he did, largely thanks to Dennis, who stayed by his side for weeks in Stoke Mandeville Hospital, where Jimmy Savile visited so many patients and was, according to Lawrence, a pain, constantly annoying and cheerful, but never tried anything dodgy with anyone as far as I could see. Not that this will change any media-convinced minds. After all, it was a great story.
Lovely lad, he was. A lovely lad. Got to know him. He got to know him through Dennis. He's popped round to see Dennis, and I got to know him. And he had a motorbike, and unfortunately, he had a really serious motorbike accident. So I think it was between Weybridge and Weybridge Station along that road there. Can't remember exactly, but anyway, he finished up at Stoke Mandeville Hospital, and they said, "Oh no, I'm drinking water. Excuse me." They said that he probably would never walk again. But anyway, he managed to be able to drive a car, a Volvo.
Now, what would you think decent, honest police officers would do? Before arresting Dennis, they would surely have visited Liam and Lawrence and asked whether these false allegations had any truth about them. But no, at exactly the same time that Dennis was arrested, at 7 o'clock in the morning on the 9th of September 2015, cops banged at the door of Liam and Lawrence, demanding to be let in and wanting statements that their friend Dennis had raped them. No, absolutely not. No attempts at anything sexual whatsoever. Please go away, and no, I shall not make any statement. Given that, you'd think the three witches would apologise to Dennis profusely and let him go home. No, he was interviewed for hours under caution and then only released on bail under strict conditions not to contact, directly or indirectly, Liam or Lawrence, or he would be sent straight to prison. What the fuck? In Great Britain 2015, this is considered honest policing? It took me several weeks to convince Dennis to get his lawyers to order Surrey Police to cancel the bail conditions and allow Dennis to contact both Liam and Lawrence, who'd both denied any kind of abuse. Eventually, they grudgingly allowed NFA, no further action. NFA for what? For arresting, interviewing and bailing a man when no serious claims had been made against him? Disgraceful. I drove Dennis over to see Lawrence, who was delighted to see us both. Lawrence revealed the bent cops had tried to get him to make false allegations against me too, which he'd also refused to do. Transcripts of this were also failed to be disclosed to my defence. Lawrence described what had happened as the worst thing in my life. When I jokingly pointed out that he'd almost died during his accident when he was 20, he said this was far, far worse. He told us he'd been rushed to hospital after the raid and had almost died. He could still not keep anything down as he gestured to the half-consumed plate of food in front of him. He hugged and kissed Dennis as we left. He asked me to leave him the Silver Lady emblem from my Rolls Royce when I died, so he could install it on his wheelchair. A few days later, we heard the news that Lawrence had passed away. He was 57. Chalk up the first death contributed to by Surrey Police.
Hold on a moment. What connection between his death and Surrey Police? He said to me and others when we visited him, Surrey Police damn nearly killed me. The hospital and the nurses and the doctors will confirm that if they're asked. But he didn't, did he? He died at home a few weeks later after you visited him. Yes, but it was the stress of the police raid that caused him to have those health problems. But why didn't you do something about it? Surely the coroners looked into it. He believed that not being able to stop them entering his home, he was in a wheelchair after all, and then being treated as though the Gestapo had arrived, all contributed to the stress that rushed him to hospital later. Complain to the coroners. Get on to the police about this. The inquest said natural causes. That's what the coroners said. Natural causes. Looking after their own? Surrey coroners are based in Woking, right next to Woking Police Station, where Operation Ravine was based. Some hope of impartiality there. Looking after their own.
In other news, Mark Williams Thomas left Surrey Police in 2000. He later offered to sell the media names and contact details of false accusers for lots of cash, as long as they never revealed him as the source. He then made a fortune from the Jimmy Savile TV exposure. Savile was conveniently dead. Some other victims of his enthusiasm for profiting from sex stories are, however, still alive. Not all of them. He was recently himself exposed in a national newspaper. What a piece of work.
If I know a false accuser is lying, can I assist her or him with helpful details?
Oh yes, it's a very good way to help false accusers, who we like to call victims. If they come to you and they clearly are not making any sense, you can assist them like that by telling them things and details that they wouldn't know unless they had been genuinely abused. The old trick, of course, is if you know the abuser is circumcised. or not circumcised. And you could have found that out by somebody else, or even by strip searching them when you went to their home, and you could actually notify the false accuser, or victims, as we like to call them, of those little facts and figures. Things that you found in the house, things that you found out while you were examining and interviewing the suspect. All these things can be handed to the false accuser, or victims as we like to call them, and they can use them to their advantage.
Did you know I've sung on 40 million records? The lead vocal on 40 million records. Isn't that incredible? In my short life, 40 million records.
Full of singing, out of tune. Everyone's gone to the moon. God's voices calling for my golden skylight gray. Una paloma blanca, I'm just a bird in the sky.
Every year I try to drive down the Riviera from Cannes to Rome in Italy, the greatest drive in the world. Although lovely Grace Kelly didn't agree, after she married the Prince of Monaco and became a princess, she came a nasty cropper on one of the smaller roads here and ended her life far too early. But back to equally lovely but gender imperfect Rob Randall. You may remember Rob, one of the first disc jockeys at Dennis's Walton Hop, and ever since his best and closest friend. Rob was very successful and a delightful man, but he had a major problem. He was homosexual, gay. At a time when Great Britain, especially the establishment, but mainly the mighty British police force, was fractionally less homophobic than Iran or Uganda. Not anymore, of course. Even then, much of the establishment was gay, and those that weren't liked booking hookers to dress up as schoolgirls and spank them, a very odd bunch, which also liked stuffing oranges in their mouths and masturbating whilst hanging themselves, in excess, you might say. And these days, much of Britain's police force are gay, lesbians more than queens, dykey, short-haired butch lesos, but lesos nonetheless. And good luck to them, I say. It used to be convenient to hire the odd lesbian, now it's obligatory. But homophobia is still dominating the UK cops, who are always delighted to wreck the lives of a few elderly faggots. Surrey police had arrested Rob Randall along with King and Corday and interviewed him at length about two men he swore to me he'd never heard of, let alone fumbled with. Rob was totally distressed by this. Even 20 years earlier, when they'd managed to convict him of a very minor offence for which he'd received tiny little community sentences, he'd been devastated by the possible effect on his reputation. Remember, we came from the generation where being gay was a crime and total social leprosy, often leading to shame and suicide. I spent hours at Rob's flat in his beloved Walton-on-Thames, just around the corner from the Hop, trying to persuade him that there were worse things than court and that prison could be great fun. I'd loved my time there if you treated it right, but he was adamant if they constructed any more false allegations for him to defend himself when answering bail, he'd kill himself. How can I prove I didn't do something 50 years ago, JK? It's impossible. He's telling me that. Sadly, I was abroad on holiday when he was told that when answering bail, he would be interviewed about 4 more false accusers that Bent Surrey police had managed to invent. Rob killed himself. He left suicide notes. Surrey police asked for copies, which they were given in order to pass them on to the coroners. Dennis gave them to the officer. The Surrey coroners, remember them? Based in Woking, right next door to Surrey Police Operation Ravine, so nice and close, decided that Rob had died from natural causes. Rob had no close family. Surrey police could and did get away with murder, to use a phrase. Please don't under any circumstances take this as literally intended. I would not, I repeat not, in a million years dream of suggesting that Surrey police murdered anyone, but possibly contributed to the deaths of both Lawrence and Rob. Yes, I would suggest that it is quite possible, just as they may have contributed to the death of Breck Bednar when his poor mother, disturbed by his online contact with Lewis Danes, called Surrey police and was told politely, always politely, to fuck off. If they'd bothered to check online, Lewis was listed a possible abuser, just as they may have contributed to the deaths of Amélie de Lagrange and Marcia MacDonald when vile Levi Belfield evaded capture or examination after killing Millie Dowler. The excellent TV series Manhunt called them carrots, short for carrot munchers. Just as they may have contributed to the deaths of those poor kids at Deep Cut Barracks. Just check the comments of the coroners regarding Surrey police and the Deep Cut investigations. Surrey police have been, at best, incompetent and, at worst, corrupt for decades. They've escaped censure, not for much longer. Dennis Corday was, of course, shattered by the deaths of his 2 closest friends, Lawrence, dead at 57, and Rob, dead at 79. He stopped eating, he stopped drinking, he went into terminal mourning. Here are 2 photos of him, one taken in 2015 before Operation Ravine kicked off, and one taken in 2016 after all this. Dennis was forced to move out of his beloved old flat where he'd lived for 60 years into a care home. He died in January 2017, aged 87, another victim of Surrey police and their false accusers. Well, in Dennis's case, no false accusers at all. What does all this matter? They're all dead, all 3. They don't care. But tomorrow it could be your father, your grandfather, your brother, your husband, lover, or even your wife or sister or mother. This has to stop. The behaviour of incompetent or corrupt cops, of bent lawyers, and of a broken judicial system. But not in my case, a broken judicial system. More of that later. This is the Hotel Royal in San Remo in Italy. In San Remo it's known for the Italian Song Festival they've had every year. I used to come here and cover a lot of the really good Italian hit songs with English lyrics that I wrote for them. such as Eros Ramazzotti, Una storia importante, Claudia Baglioni's Questo piccolo grande amore, and perhaps most successful of all was an artist called Umberto Tozzi, who recorded a song in Italian called Gloria. I wrote the English lyric, which he loved and recorded himself on his album. It was also recorded and became a huge hit worldwide for Laura Branigan. Unfortunately, she wrote her own English lyric for it and screwed me out of millions and millions of pounds in royalties. But never mind, I was right, it was a great hit. I've also written another Italian song which I think is quite fun. It's better if you understand Italian, which is very rude in this song, and it's called Figlia Bambina.
A beautiful lady, classy and solo, she spoke no Inglese, and I no Romano. I begged my dear amico, who lived in San Basilio, teach me amore in Italiano, Nino. Figlio di mignota, mortacci tua, vaffanculo, io vecchio inglese froccio, figlio di mignota, mortacci tua, porca Madonna bambina. I booked a tavolo per due at the Sanssouci Ristorante. The orchestra played sweetly as we sipped our Chianti. I held her hand, stroked her thighs, looked into her eyes, whispered these words of love, watched her delighted surprise. Figlio di mignota, mortacci tua, vaffanculo, io vecchio inglese froccio, figlio di mignota, mortacci tua, porca Madonna bambina. Figlio di mignota, mortacci tua, vaffanculo, io vecchio inglese froccio, figlio di mignota, mortacci tua, porca Madonna bambina.
Ow!
Back in the 1970s, when I was a very wealthy young pop star, I used to stay here in the Grand Hotel, and I had a fabulous suite, almost the entire first floor, overlooking the Piazza della Repubblica in Rome. One day I arrived back and the concierge stopped me on my way up and said, "Yesterday Aristotle Onassis arrived unexpectedly and asked if he could have his favourite suite, please." And I replied to him, "No, I was sorry, it was occupied." To which Aristotle Onassis said, "Who by?" And the concierge replied, "Jonathan King." To which Aristotle Onassis said, "Who is Jonathan King?" I've always cherished the fact that the richest man in the world once asked who I was. I love Rome, and one of my favourite restaurants is in Tivoli, about 20 minutes drive out of the city, where you can see for miles and miles on a clear day. Indeed, you can see all the 7 hills of Rome. You can almost hear the clattering hooves of the chariot carrying the emperor out to the oracle of Sibyl. Sibyl! When he travelled to the temple to ask her if he should invade distant lands like Britain. After slitting open a passing chicken and examining its entrails, she would answer, yes. So he'd clatter back to Rome and organise an army or two. Little did Boadicea know, though I believe she's now called Boudica or something silly like that. The temple still stands, well, bits of it, and since 1720 it's been a restaurant called Sibylla's, which I've patronised for over 50 years. This is one of my favourite restaurants in the world, not because of the food, which is fine but very simple, but because it's been here for hundreds of years. It was started in 1720. Napoleon ate here. I tend to eat where Napoleon sat, and the views are spectacular. It somehow gives me enormous pleasure to know that I'm sitting in exactly the same seat that Napoleon sat in hundreds of years ago, and he probably also ate pasta with mushrooms and sipped a cold beer as he gazed out at the tumbling waterfalls and admired the view on his way to Villa Adriana down the road and the beautiful gardens there. But now is the time for me to get really nasty, because I don't blame the false accusers or even the media, who cannot resist a good story, especially one involving sex and a major international celebrity. Although by 2015 I was neither a major celebrity nor even globally noticed, which may explain the rather small amount of media coverage compared to 2000. They'd moved on to new stars like Donald Trump and Bill Cosby and Kevin Spacey and many, many others. Lawrence, Robb and Dennis were virtually unknown, as the junior police discovered when virtually no false accusers took the bait placed in the media. That's why they had to adapt their trawling to failed old lies from 20 years earlier, calling and begging the people to revive and inflate their past claims. But this approach breached so many legal or moral patterns of behaviour that I became incensed, after the third death clearly, to me, provoked by Surrey police. You simply cannot go around killing innocent people just because you suffer as a cop from compassion fatigue and no longer care whether you destroy lives or not. So I complained formally and in writing to the Chief Constable of Surrey, Nick F. and the elected Police and Crime Commissioner of Surrey, David Munro, sending them evidence, photographs and details in thick packs via registered post. I thought this would provoke horror about the way police had behaved and immediately halt the witch hunt. They would probably reprimand or dismiss the offending officers, who I've chosen to allow anonymity in here so as not to affect the fairness of any future criminal trials against them, and take immediate action. Did they? Did they fuck? The complaints procedure in the UK is designed, as it is, I suspect, in many other countries, to protect those breaching moral or even legal practices and to cover up incompetence and even criminal behaviour. So Chief Constable F. and PCC Munro and those behind them and protecting them dismissed any bad behaviour by their officers and waved my complaints away by saying there was a trial coming up and they couldn't examine anything just yet for fear of prejudicing the trial. God forbid! Assuming I'd certainly be found guilty, slammed into prison and silenced probably forever. Their one desire was
to shut me up. And I have to tell you, I am absolutely, totally, 100% guilty of not shutting up. Warning, this could be the most offensive sequence you've ever seen. Me doing my daily swim, which in total used to be 5 hours a day. Now it's nearer just a couple of hours in half-hour chunks, but still quite nauseating for those of a nervous disposition. But the good news is, I intend to deal with my personal trial from 2018 very briefly. The first false accuser fell to bits when we revealed we had contacted his mother and destroyed his story that he'd only ever had contact with me once in 1970, as he said when asked by police if he'd ever had contact with me again. He replied, "No, why would I have?" And my solicitor discovered an interview he'd done with a Scottish newspaper in 1991, claiming he'd been the lead singer with his good friend Jonathan King's group, the Weathermen. When confronted by this, he admitted in court it was a total fantasy. One of the jury looked at me, smiled, and raised his eyebrows. A second liar, who'd worked in Claridge's, admitted he'd been 16, not 14, and we proved he'd been behaving very strangely there. He said in open court he had been making £500 a week in the 1970s as a junior waiter. That's £2,000 a week in today's equivalent money. He was also found to have raped his 10-year-old sister when he was 20. Another 2 jurors looked at me and shook their heads. A third liar turned out to have been resident in 23 mental institutions and rehab units in the last decades of the last century. He had been the original liar who started it all in 2000 by going to Max Clifford and then spending 11 hours alone with a junior Surrey police constable, Mark Williams Thomas, in the year 2000. I was declared not guilty of the 3 most serious false claims, the trial collapsed, and the judge denied the police and prosecution any retrial. The evidence that emerged during the 2018 trial has also revealed massive flaws in my 2001 prosecution, so I'm appealing that wrongful conviction. The judge's ruling was incredibly critical about Surrey Police and the CPS. She saw through their lies and subterfuge very quickly. As she described it, persistent misleading of the court. I only wished Lawrence, Rob and Dennis had been alive to hear it. I am the editor of the biggest national daily newspaper in Great Britain. Times have changed. Instead of the busy office with the clattering of typewriters and the ringing of telephone bells, now we sit in our little offices with computers in front of us and smartphones at the ready on silent. What has been amazing about the media coverage of so many sex cases is that they very rarely cover the acquittals and the numerous false allegations. Well, that's easily understood. The only thing we care about in the national media is having a good story. A great story. A story where preferably wealthy celebrities are brought down having feet of clay. That's what we like, and we really don't like when it's proven that they're actually innocent. That's not a good story, especially if the false accusers, who we have to sympathise with, poor souls, if they turn out to be liars, fantasists, even worse, if they turn out to have been provoked or even insisted and encouraged by bent police officers or corrupt lawyers after large sums of money, often in compensation. or if the false accusers are there because of malice, or a desire for revenge, or a desire for sympathy, or any other kind of motivation, including genuine delusion. A lot of false accusers actually do believe their false allegations. Over the years, especially, historically, especially if their perpetrators are dead, they tend to think of things in a different way. Memories get inflated, coloured, and of course we in the media assist that, because a good story has got to have loads and loads of salacious information and lots of colour. So we, in the traditional media, and even in the new media, social media is worst of all. Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, all those various assorted means of communication by ordinary people reflect the ordinary thoughts of people who used to write letters in green ink to the national newspapers or lean over the garden fence having a good old gossip. So never trust us media when it comes to covering sex stories. We want the worst and the most gory and the most ghastly possible. I am an editor of a national public newspaper.
In other news, Carl Beach was known as Nick when he made startling revelations to the media and to police about sex abuse and murder. They, of course, believed him and assisted him. It was discovered he was a mad fantasist because of media outrage and the fury of his innocent victims. He was prosecuted, convicted, and given 18 years in prison. His enablers, however, walked free and unchecked to assist other false accusers. What a strange society we live in.
Hi there, pop pickers! It's Top of the Pops and the Them Too chart for 2020 at number 5. False accusers. False accusers often are genuinely deluded and genuinely believe their stories, but more often than not, they're after cash. At number 4, corrupt lawyers. They end up with most of the cash. They encourage, assist, and sometimes even provoke the false accusers. At number 3 on the chart, politicians. The politicians who always obey the media who always want a good story, and the politicians who declare that the law says these days the presumption of innocence needs to be replaced by the presumption of guilt. Why? Because it's a better story. And at number 2, the media, who always love a good story. But at number 1, on top of the pops of the hashtag Them2 chart 2020, bent cops. Bent cops do very nicely from false allegations. They get promotion, they get budget increases, they get praise, and most of all, they get on television, standing on the steps of courts and saying, "This is the worst case I've ever seen in all my life."
What are the best ways to terrify a suspect? Oh yes, there are many ways to frighten people. Best way, of course, is getting a search warrant, which you can lie to get, because judges and magistrates don't care these days if you're not telling them the truth. But then searching at all is great fun. It's sort of state-sanctioned rape, essentially. Smashing in the door and causing enormous damage, ripping them out of bed, hopefully totally naked, which is great fun, especially if they're women. and then generally ruining their life and making them absolutely miserable. There are many other things you can do. Planting drugs, although that's not as common as it used to be, but make sure you take some heroin in a plastic bag or something without any fingerprints on it, of course, and you happen to find it popping around. Pornography. Porn is wonderful, but the trouble is mostly these days porn is on computers. Well, of course, we've got ways of sticking that on a computer so that nobody knows about it, and that tends to work very well. But just in case, do take a couple of photographs of children, small babies being buggered by donkeys, and leave them lying around, and then find them and express horror to your other officers. Look at this! It goes down very well indeed. All these things are great tricks you can use. Even afterwards, even if the trial fails disastrously and the suspect is acquitted, you can always sue them. Why not? You can sue them. The false accusers, we like to call them victims, they can sue them. You can just keep things going on forever and ever to make their lives fucking miserable.
Well, that's that then. We accomplished nothing this time around. The second bite at the cherry turned out to be a poisoned apple. But at least I did manage to get bumped up to a more senior role in my quest to become Chief Constable. After all, I have the one qualification needed to get to the top. I'm a woman.
Are you sure about that?
Well, we did manage to rid the world of 3 perverts.
Correction. Never forget the presumption of innocence. And one of them wasn't even accused of being a pervert, just the victim of a pervert.
And forget about presumption of innocence, everyone else does. It's not so much of a good story. And anyway, they're dead. Everyone can be presumed guilty if they're dead.
Onwards and upwards. Well, I've managed to divorce my shit of an husband. Now let's go and arrest a few more innocent idiots.
Hubble bubble, toil and trouble! Hubble bubble, toil and trouble! Hubble bubble, toil and trouble!
So the 3 witches went on to greater success, promotion, raised salaries, awards. After all, they had the best intentions. Some might think they should have been booted out of the police, leaving although they didn't want to.
Stay.
I sensed a sea change. More and more celebrities, falsely accused, were being acquitted, and so were innocent men like Liam Allen, falsely accused of rape, and false accusers like Gemma Beale were finally being prosecuted and jailed. I had kept pounding at the CPS at Chief Constable F. Grave at PCC Monroe. They ignored me. At trial again and again, gross incompetence and possible corruption by police officers emerged. False accusers exposed with lie after lie, witnesses who turned out to be dead or never spoken to. Surrey Police issued a mealy-mouthed apology and set up an independent inquiry. I demanded both F. Grave and Monroe should quit. F. Grave did, immediately, jumping ship to a lower-paid job with the Met. Monroe refused. I spent hours trying to convince Surrey County Council, technically his boss, to fire him, but they avoided doing so. However, local councillors, furious about my case, I had letters of support from them, astonished everyone by deciding to reject him as their Conservative candidate at the next election and chose a young lady instead. Monroe remained in place for a few months, hanging on to his job by his fingernails. And the media saw the light. Articles began to appear saying that perhaps my convictions in 2001 needed immediate examination. We applied to the CCRC, the body in charge of appeals, producing loads of fresh evidence that my convictions had been wrong. The Times came out on my side, so did several other papers.
Why don't you fuck off? I keep seeing that stupid face of mine day and night. Fuck off, face. Fuck off, Jonathan King face. Just fuck off. Let me read you this passage from a speech by the loathsome F. Grave to the police bigwigs, defending supporting corrupt police officers. I think it's absolutely disgraceful.
Surrey Chief Constable threatened watchdog over detective proceedings. I want to push this message with my people that as long as you record your rationale and as long as it's not bonkers, and it never is in my view, if the worst were to happen, sometimes that's policing, sometimes that happens. Just let me read you again the line that I think is really crucial. As long as it's not bonkers, and it never is in my view. Never? Sometimes, yes, sometimes it's not bonkers, sometimes the police make a mistake, but never? Is he out of his tiny little mind? As for slimy F. Grave and cunning Monroe, they, like many bosses, escaped censure by slipping sideways or slithering into other positions and cashing in on pensions, poaching nest eggs, retiring into luxury or comfy South Coast bungalows. As for our hero, Dennis Corday, remember him, in 2015 rather overweight, plump but happy. In 2016, after Surrey Police and Operation Ravine for a few months, devastated, not eating or drinking, lost weight, depressed, lost the will to live. In January 2017, dragged into a care home, covered in bed sores, dead at 87. Does anybody care that an 87-year-old died? Nope. Or that Rob Randall died aged 79? Nope. Or that Lawrence died aged 56? Nope. That's just the way it is with British police and, I suspect, global police these days. Does anybody care about innocent men and women in prisons around the world and their families and friends? A few, yes, but most people, nope.
Does anybody care that police and prosecutors fail on so many levels? Sometimes incompetent, sometimes corrupt, sometimes even criminal. A few care, yes, but you? Nope. Do governments the world over mind that often police bend the rules in order to achieve targets? Nope. And use tricks as loopholes? Nope. As Alfred E. Newman used to say, the divine spokesman for Mad magazine, what? Me worry?
So there we go. I needn't be D'Angelo any longer. Get rid of this bloody thing. Easier said than done. That's better. I feel normal now. That's basically it. So there we are, and we're now in this strange world where all these bizarre happenings have occurred. And it seems to be a world that we've created of almost sheer insanity, where such things as positive discrimination have taken over. And as a result, everybody is very keen to obey instructions and to be politically correct at all times, which I think has caused terrible illness because it's gone to an extreme and it's no more sane. It's crossed over this whole mad positive discrimination into the world of the law and justice and sexuality. So what we now have is a world where everybody is believed, which is mad. Why believe people? Some will be telling the truth. Some will be completely making it up as lies in order to get money or compensation or sympathy or attention or whatever. Most will be somewhere in the middle, exaggerating a story or telling what they want to tell. But either way, why believe everybody? There is absolutely no point in believing everybody. So I say to all false accusers everywhere, to all bent or incompetent cops, to all bent or incompetent members of the prosecution, the CPS and all the various other societies, I say to every single one of them, the media, the judiciary, all these people, do you know what I say to you? I say this. You're all dicks. You're all dicks.
Don't act little when you're with me. Don't be small when I'm around. Think big and look at what you see, and keep your feet on the ground. We go to parties with each other. You live in the shadow of a man. You can't imagine being without me, 'cause that's when your life began. But baby, don't act little when you're with me. Don't be small when I'm around. Think big and look at what you see, and keep your feet on the ground. You make me coffee every morning, say the things I like to hear. You don't object when I push you round, just as long as I stay near. Analyze my every movement, do just what I want you to. In your opinion, the world turns around me, will never turn around you. So come on babe, don't act little when you're with me. No, don't be small when I'm around. Baby, think big and look at what you see, and keep your feet on the ground. Come on, child, don't act little when you're with me. Hey, don't be small when I'm around. Baby, 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 think big and look at what you see. And keep your feet on the ground.